Your baby's mind is growing even before they arrive. The more you talk and sing and play, the more their mind will thrive. You gotta talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby, make out you're a lion. Talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby. Your words will grow their mind.
This season, we are recording on Ghana land at Podbooth Studio each and every episode, and we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging.
Your words will grow their mind.
Hello and welcome to Words Grow Minds. We're a podcast dedicated to promoting healthy childhood development. I'm Kate Ellis. I'm a mum to Sam and to Charlie, and I am super excited about today's episode for a couple of really important reasons. The first one is that listeners would know that I normally co-host this with the wonderful Amelia Mulcahy. Now, because Amelia is so talented and so professional, she's also highly in demand, and so she's been double booked for today and can't be with us. But the good news is that because everybody knows I can't be trusted without a trained professional journalist by my side, we have the amazing Daniela Ritorto stepping in as our guest co-host. And welcome to you, Daniela.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so excited and honoured to be here filling in for the amazing Amelia. She is amazing indeed. Hi, I'm Daniela. I'm also, like you, Kate, a mum to a Charlie. He's almost 4 years old. And I have to say, because I know you're a bit further along in the mum journey, but so far for me, almost 4, I reckon, is my favourite stage. I think 4-year-olds are the most amazing people. And it's the chats.
And he is a gorgeous, gorgeous boy.
So speaking of chats, what are we going to talk about on today's episode?
Well, some of this today is really heavy, but we're going to talk about the worry and the unease that parents might be feeling after seeing some horrific stories of abuse in our early childhood education and care settings over the past year. Luckily, we have a remarkable guest who we hope will help reassure us, but also give us some great practical tips to get the best care for our children.
Yeah, I know this isn't going to be an easy conversation to have, but I'm glad we're having it because it's so important, and I'm really glad who we're going to have this conversation with.
I know. And this brings me to the second reason I am so excited about today's episode is that we have the amazing Georgie Dent with us today. And I have to tell you, Amelia is absolutely devastated.
Yes.
She is a mega fangirl of Georgie and all of Georgie's work, but we're delighted that Georgie can be with us.
I'm a fangirl of Georgie's, you're a fangirl of Georgie's, and it's because I'm sure everyone has seen her on TV speaking up for parents across Australia in her role as the CEO of the advocacy group, the Parenthood. She's a former lawyer, a journalist, she's a best-selling author, media commentator, and a highly sought-after speaker, and she is absolutely determined and committed and is dedicating her life's work, frankly, to enacting positive change for families, women and children. And she's doing this all while being a mum of 3 herself.
Amazing. Georgie Dent, welcome to the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have to say, I do feel a little bit overwhelmed by the kind and generous words.
There's 3 fangirls we've got here.
That is a lot. Look, I am absolutely delighted to be here with you all. And I do have 3 girls. And I have to be honest, we are through the early years. So my girls are 9, 13 and 15. But I remember the early years so vividly. And, I was fortunate in that time to have some great support and some less support. And it has really shaped my determination to help advocate for better policies so that children and parents and caregivers in those early years get the support they need when they need it.
And we are so grateful for the work that you do. Today, I want to start in the deepest, darkest part first so that we can lift ourselves back up. But we do know that parents have read some horrible headlines, been appalled by the most disgusting allegations and a string of just, frankly, unthinkable charges that have been made in Australian childcare settings. So I just want to start with, what do you say to the parent that's seen all of this and is nearing the end of their parental leave, now questioning whether they can return to work, whether they should, the parents grappling with completely valid concerns about their child's safety, the parents in danger of just losing their faith in our system? What do you say to them?
Look, what I say is that it is completely warranted and understandable that you would be feeling torn and conflicted and deeply stressed and distressed. What we have seen this year, what we've learnt this year, is so incredibly distressing. And I know that I have been advocating for children and parents in Australia to have access to high quality early education and care for over a decade now. And the idea that some families have been let down in the way they have, in that promise of the high quality system hasn't delivered, it's just heartbreaking. I have found that on a personal level very difficult this year to confront those realities. And I think we have seen this year a spectrum of, we have obviously seen and heard about horrendous allegations of abuse, but we have also just seen instances of mistreatment and of neglect. And all of those represent such a concern to parents. I am, as I said, my children are out of the early years now. And so I'm really acutely aware that I am not in the position that some parents are. But I put myself in those shoes when I had little kids and they were all at early education and care at different points. I didn't ever send them fearing for their safety or their well-being. And the truth is, keeping children safe is the absolute baseline all of us are entitled to expect in an early education and care setting. It's the absolute baseline. What we actually want for children in those settings is to be supported and nurtured so that they can thrive. And I think what I would also say to parents is we cannot ignore what we have learnt this year. There has to be really radical reform. But equally, we do have high quality early education and care settings in Australia. We've got amazing educators and teachers. They do exist. So it's hard to, accept these two realities, that there are some services and settings which have failed children in the most catastrophic ways. But there are also a lot more services out there that are actually delivering for children, where the educators and all of the staff are motivated by doing the best by the little children.
Georgie, I'm sure you remember at the time of some of the worst allegations being made that the response, and I think it's natural and we understand it, was for some parents to actually request that their children not be in the presence of male educators. And that sparked a broader debate about whether there should be men in the system and in the sector at all. This is a hard question, but what are your thoughts? Where do you stand on that? And where are we sort of, a few months down the line from that conversation starting?
Look, I have been in quite a few rooms recently where this has come up. Early childhood education and care conferences, for example, where there's been a lot of educators in the room and there've been male educators and female educators. And I really understand, and I have heard it from so many intelligent, reasonable people, that they think if we ban men, we will protect children. And I do understand that appeal. And as I said, I have heard it. It is so popular. It's not just a sort of niche held view by a couple of people on the fringes. I feel really strongly, we know the evidence is so clear that children benefit from having positive role models. And one of the things that I have tried to say a lot this year is that we have not got a sort of problem of early childhood educators abusing children. We have had a situation where predators have exploited the weaknesses in the system to access children. And so there is a real difference there. And we don't have nearly as many male educators as we have female educators. But let's not pretend that male educators are the same as male predators. What we need is to invest in the settings to ensure that any educator who's with children is well qualified, is well supported. I have said before, we haven't seen men banned from teaching in schools or from being priests, from sporting codes, even though we know that abuse has occurred in those settings. And I think we have to be looking at how do we invest in making the system stronger and work better for everyone, rather than saying, let's ban men from having these important roles, because actually we want male teachers and male educators, because the difference that they can play in the lives of children is actually incredible.
I think that's a really important point. And from a personal point of view, my boys both went to Gowrie here in Adelaide, and I just want to do a shout out to Justin, who was their educator. And it was really important that they had someone they could relate to, that they felt really comfortable with, and that was that really great role model. And I just couldn't speak highly enough. So I think it's really important message that we understand how parents are feeling, but we do need great, strong role models. I just want to come back to, you were talking about we do have a high quality system here in Australia. So if a parent said to you, hey, Georgie, is childcare safe? What's your answer to that?
Look, my answer is there are lots of early childhood education and care services that are safe. And there are lots that are better than safe. There are plenty that are actually fantastic for children. But it is entirely reasonable and appropriate that parents look at a centre in its entirety and do some research, turn up and get to know a service before making that determination. Because we do know that not all services are created equally. You know, we do have in Australia a national quality framework that has been described reasonably as being world leading. Now, what we have learnt this year is that the national quality framework is not being enforced uniformly across the country. So we do have a significant variation in the quality of different services. And I think it is worth pointing out that within that spectrum, there are some services that have been identified by regulators as needing to be either closed or having some form of significant intervention. So that, you know, the federal government have introduced some legislation to say that some services that are persistently failing to meet the required standards are going to lose their access to the childcare subsidy or lose their funding effectively. And it's really important that we do that, because one of the things that I've learnt this year is that we do know that there are some services that are just not up to scratch. And the sort of the good news for parents is there are ways in which you can identify red flags. And that's something that it's really important to sort of do before you're making any decisions about where you're putting your child.
Okay, that leads me perfectly to my question, because that's exactly what I want to ask you. We have, Georgie, lots of listeners who are either in that first or second year of parenthood, and you're starting, like I remember at the time myself, you're starting to do the online research, then you go on a couple of tours, and then you're sort of weighing it all up. So I'm wondering, what do we look for when we're doing like the desktop research first? Then when we go on to tour, what are the red flags? What does good look like? Like, how can I be assured when I'm doing the tour and it's pretty and cute and blah, 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 that I'm actually looking for things that reassure me that this is a child-safe environment? And what are some of the questions that we should be asking?
Yeah, okay. So one of the sort of first things that you can do is you can look up the rating of any service. So, and we can put a link to that in the show notes, but it's the National Quality Framework is, there's a website, a seek, where you can look up the rating for any service. What you can also look up is when that service was last assessed, because we do know that services, again, this is a change that is being enacted so that services are being assessed far more regularly, because it's not really fair to assess a service 5 years ago. It's not really fair for parents to be expected to rely on that information as being a good indicator of what the service is actually like. But it's a really important starting point. So go and have a look at what the rating is. And what you'd be looking for is a service that is at a minimum is meeting the minimum standards or the national standards. But ideally what you're looking for is exceeding or even excellent. And those services, they're not everywhere, but they do exist and they are worth looking for if you can. It's also really important to look into what is the ownership structure of the service. So we know in Australia we've got lots of tiny for-profit childcare services that might be run by, a mum and dad. They might have a couple of services. We've got huge for-profit chains of childcare. We've got community preschools. We've got not-for-profit, large providers and small providers. Finding out what ownership structure a service is going to give you some information. Now, we do know that on the whole, the not-for-profit services do tend to have higher quality ratings. And often the reason for that is that they pay staff above award, and they treat the staff really well, where they're more likely to be investing in their professional development and their support. So things like giving them opportunities for professional development courses, giving them time off the floor to be doing planning for their classes effectively. So having that information about what type of ownership, it is important. It's not to say that if it's not for profit, there will be no problems. Equally, it's not that it's for profit, therefore it's definitely bad. It's not that, but we're just looking at a spectrum of factors to inform you when you walk into a service. When you go and do a tour, it is really important to just have your eyes open and let your senses take it in. We have all had that experience of walking into a cafe or a restaurant or even a shop sometimes, and you just feel immediately uneasy. It just, something isn't right. If that is something you're feeling, pay attention to it, to pay attention to how it's feeling in your body, because that's probably not nothing. Listen, is it calm? Is it chaotic? Now, keeping in mind, we're talking about lots of small children, so there is going to be noise, but there is a difference between, chaos that feels uneasy and chaos that feels happy and calm. One of the biggest indicators of quality in any early education and care setting is around the staff. How long have the staff been there? What is the staff turnover? Who would be the teachers and educators that would be with your child the most? I know these questions aren't necessarily easy, but I also know they're really important. And I know parents are motivated by wanting to ensure their child is in a high quality environment. So asking around how long staff have been there, how many casuals they use, getting a sense of that is also going to help inform you. The gold standard is when you've got a bunch of educators and teachers who've been in a service for a long time. Now, most services will have some reliance on some casual staff. So it's not to say if there's any casual staff, you're not going to go there, but it is really about looking at the core team. Have they been there for a long time? It's also about, speaking to other parents who've been to particular services. And, those are the sorts of green flags to look out for. Have you got staff that have been there for a while? Does it just feel good? You can let your you have to, your child, and you have to be able to look at that environment and say, this is somewhere I think my little person can fit and they would be valued. And it's not a perfect science, but if you look into all of these factors, it will help form a picture of a particular setting. One of the things that I did want to say, and I was going to say this at the very beginning, is that I want to acknowledge the difficulty that parents face in this regard, because we know that in 2025 or 2026, living in Australia, it is a really expensive time to be alive, and it is a really expensive time to raise a small family. So, there is research that's been done that shows families of young children do bear the brunt of all of the increasing mortgage and rent costs, increasing inflation, the cost of living, the cost of food. So few households have got the opportunity for a parent to be out of the paid workforce for an extended period of time. And for the households that don't have family nearby that are physically, financially, logistically able to step in and provide care, that means households have to look at formal childcare for them to be able to do the work they need to provide for these children. And I think it's really easy to forget that parents are not, too few parents have got genuine choice when it comes to how they combine work and care. And that's the context that makes looking for the right early education and care service really challenging, because it's not necessarily you've got all of these options in the world and you think, no, I'm going to wait and I don't want to do this. And if you've got two children, trying to get them both into the same service on the same days, it's like winning the lottery. And so I just want to acknowledge that this is not a simple undertaking for a lot of families, where it's like going into a shop and choosing a dress that you might like. It is so difficult because it is, it's existential in a way. You either can provide for your family or you can't.
Georgie, one of the reasons I love talking to you is because you answer the question I'm just about to ask, just when I'm about to ask it. And I actually wanted to talk about choice because, as you said, choice is a luxury that lots of parents feel like they don't have. So I want to talk about those parents who there may not be an abundance of accessible services nearby. They might go and do a visit. They might look up the rating and see that the service is not yet meeting the national quality standards and is still working towards them. They might feel unease when they go into that service. Maybe can we just talk about the options outside of centre-based care? Like, you have 80,000 parents signed up to the Parenthood. What are some of the other options that are available to some of those parents?
Yeah, so look, some of the work that we've done the last couple of years, we've really focused on talking to parents and families who live in regional, rural and remote parts of the country, because their challenges in accessing early education and care are different. Now, we have got in Australia a situation where about a quarter of the country lives in what is described as a childcare desert, where there are 3 or more children for every available position within, I think it's about a sort of 25-minute drive. We know there are childcare deserts inside capital cities as well. They're in a lot of outer metropolitan areas, but they are more congregated, as you would expect, in regional, rural, remote areas. And it presents huge challenges, not just to individual families, but to communities, to employers, because, the number of parents we've spoken to who are school principals or GPs or nurses or, aged care workers, the community desperately needs them, and those families desperately need that work so they can provide for their family. But when there's no formal early education and care available, those options aren't there. And so our campaign director, Maddie Butler, has set up a coalition that's got more than 80 organisations signed on to it. And all of those organisations, it ranges from the Country Women's Association, the National Farmers Federation, the Grain Growers, the Medical Association, a whole lot of regional councils, all of whom agree that we need to have early education and care available in all communities. And one of the things that we recognise in that coalition is that there does need to be flexibility in what those services look like. So we have got, centre-based care is the sort of most dominant option. That's the most widely available that families use. But things like having high quality family daycare, having the ability for in-home care when that's the only and best option there, things like mobile early learning, because for a lot of rural and remote communities, a centre-based option is not going to be viable. So we have been trying to advocate and really connecting with our community around what are the different options that families need that ensure children have the opportunity to thrive, parents have the ability to participate in the workforce that they need, and communities get the benefit of those parents fulfilling the essential roles.
This has been such an incredible conversation so far, Georgie. I've been furiously taking notes throughout. We're just going to have a quick break. Kate, Georgie, we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about what good looks like and some of the work you do at the Parenthood.
Your baby's mind is growing even before they arrive. The more you talk and sing and play, the more their mind will thrive. Gotta talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby, make out you're a lion. Talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby. Your words will grow their mind. Every time you interact with your child, you're helping grow their mind. For more information, visit wordsgrowminds.org.au.
Well, welcome back, Kate and Georgie. Georgie, when we think about the good things that childcare and early education and care can bring to the lives of our children and us as parents. I would hope you could reflect on some of that. I know for myself and my son and the relationships that he has at childcare, I couldn't replicate in the home. And I think early education and care, when it's good, adds so much richness to his life and to our lives.
Yeah, thank you. And that is such an important question, because I think that this year, with all of the difficulties, it is easy to lose sight of what quality early education and care can be and do. And the truth is, we know that when it's high quality, it is actually life-changing. We can change the trajectory of a little person's life by giving them the opportunity to participate in high-quality early learning environments. On a personal level, for so many families, when you have got little children, a lot of us don't have the village that we all know it takes to raise a family. And when you have access to quality early childhood education and educators and teachers who know your child and love your child and who know you and your family, the benefits are hard to quantify and describe. I know that when our children were little, the educators and teachers were some of the most important people in our lives. We don't have grandparents that live in Sydney, or we live in Sydney. We don't have grandparents here. It was educators who said to us at different points, hey, do you want to go and have a speech assessment? I think that would help. They were able to help us troubleshoot when, one of the girls was having a hard time at bedtime and we couldn't work out what was happening. The educators and teachers were the ones that I could talk to. The number of days that I arrived with one of our girls still in pajamas because they just were having one of those days, and the educators and teachers would just wrap us all up. And we know the sort of statistics and the research are that when you have a child who participates in high quality early education, they're more likely to arrive at school developmentally on track. And as you are both so aware, in Australia, we do have a problem. 1 in 5 children on average are starting school developmentally vulnerable. We know it's much higher in regional and rural and remote areas. We know it's much higher in communities with any form of disadvantage. And early education and care that's high quality is one of the ways that is proven to combat that, because you can help support and nurture a little person so when they arrive at school, they are ready to learn and thrive. And it's not about displacing or replacing the role and value of parents or even grandparents or loving friends, but it's about recognizing that early childhood education is actually education. And I don't pretend that I can teach my children maths or science in the way their teachers can, because they're teachers. I was able to love and teach our children so much as their mum, and I still can. But them being in those sort of preschool settings and early childhood education and care settings with educators and teachers who are trained and professional and expert at working with 3-year-olds. I often say to parents, and this is obviously, if you've got multiple births, this is slightly different, but often you'll only have 1 3-year-old in your house at any one point in time. So you're not going to necessarily pick up on the nuances that might be different about your child. Early educators and teachers see 20 to 33-year-olds every single day, and they have done, ideally, for more than a year. And so they can pick up on things that we simply can't. And it's not about one role being more important than the other, but it is about how can early childhood education and care complement parents and work in partnership. And, Daniela, that's what you asked about, what quality looks like. Quality looks like parents and educators and children being in partnership and working from a position of trust and respect.
I think that's such an important point that we don't often reflect upon, that, perhaps as a new parent, as a first-time parent, or just as a completely clueless parent, that it's actually really reassuring when you've got professionals who learn and connect and know your child. And it's like you've got backup there.
Yes.
If you're missing something, if there's something that you can't see or a support that your child might need, having that extra person there. And that we don't really talk about that when we talk about formal care settings. I also just wanted to talk about the role of parents in I mean, I've been lucky enough to be at many conferences, seminars, forums, workshops where Georgie has been. And I don't think I have ever been in one where at some point Georgie hasn't said, hang on a second, can we stop just talking about the system and actually start talking about parents and the role that parents have and the importance of parental capacity.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk about the Parenthood. That's what you do. Can you maybe just explain to our listeners what is the Parenthood, what's the benefits of it and how they might be able to get involved?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. And that is very kind. I mean, I am fortunate enough to be in a lot of those forums and settings, and I do feel very responsible for ensuring that we centre the voices of parents and carers. And so it's really nice for you to say that that's something that you recognise that I do try to do.
We told you we were fangirls, Georgie.
Don't make us fangirl again, Georgie. We're trying to be serious and professional.
I do not feel worthy of that. But so the Parenthood is a not-for-profit advocacy organisation. We've got about 84,000 parents, carers, supporters nationally. And we exist to give voice to parents. But more specifically, our mission, and it is ambitious, is to make Australia the best place in the world to be a parent and raise a child. And we are really explicit about wanting to invest in parents as a way of investing in children, because, you know, we've all heard that. We know you cannot pour from an empty cup. If we do not invest in the well-being and support and resources of parents, we absolutely cannot invest in the well-being of children. So we have to recognise that the well-being of parents is inextricably linked with the well-being of children. And at the Parenthood, we campaign for 3 key policy changes. We know they won't fix all problems for all families, but they would make Australia a world-leading country when it comes to how you can be a parent and raise a child. And it is 12 months of paid parental leave, access to totally affordable, high-quality early education and care that is inclusive and delivered by a professionally qualified and paid workforce, and access to family-friendly workplaces that value caring. So we really exist to lobby for those 3 changes. And parents can follow us on social media. They can sign up for our emails. You can look us up at the Parenthood. You can look me up at Georgie Dent and find us there. But really what we try to do is mobilise parents in our community on certain issues. So we connect parents with the media. We connect parents with decision makers. One of the most difficult days I've had this year was taking a group of parents who had each had a child mistreated or abused in an early education setting to Canberra to speak directly to decision makers. I wanted those parents to be heard, and doing that is sort of such a tangible representation of why we exist, to ensure that the voices of parents are heard when it comes to how we set policy and how we expect parents and families to survive.
Georgie, if parents do want to get more involved, how can they do so?
So I would say jump on our website, theparenthood.org.au, and sign up for our emails and follow us on social media, and you'll be able to sort of get a sense of what we're doing and how you can get involved.
Okay. I think that's a good place to wrap up. I'm going to do my Amelia impersonation, because I know Amelia always does this bit. She has the last question. So that one question is that we ask all our guests, if there was one bit of advice at the end of this conversation for parents of babies and toddlers, what would that be, Georgie?
The advice that I always give to parents of new babies and toddlers is that there is nothing more relentless than parenting in the early years. It
Amen.
is a marathon, and it is an incredible marathon, and no one will dispute the sort of privilege and joy that is inherent in it. But it's okay to find it really difficult, because it is really difficult. And I guess that's one of the things that I say at the Parenthood a lot is it's not hard because you're making the wrong choices. It's hard because it is really hard. And I think giving yourself permission to feel that difficulty is sort of like an investment in your own self-care, of saying this is really hard. And I know that if you're the kind of parent that's listening to this podcast that's even thinking about advice, you're already an incredible parent because you're engaged and you're thinking about how can I do this better, and this is something that really matters to me. But just be very kind to yourself that it is really, really hard.
They are very wise words. Georgie Dent, we are so grateful. Thank you so much for your time and being a part of the Words Grow Mind Parent podcast, but also for all of the amazing work and advocacy you do for all of us as parents relentlessly. We're very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgie. Well, Kate, we knew Georgie was going to deliver. She's just an incredible advocate, isn't she? What did you take away from that chat?
I just thought she's so well balanced in acknowledging the stress and the worry that parents have. But I thought it was really nice to be reminded of the benefits to both children and parents of good quality early childhood education and care. There are times, and we've seen times over the last few months, that we really need to reflect on that too and keep a balanced view. And I think she's a wonderful advocate for the system overall. What about you?
I really liked her practical advice about what should we be looking for. And I think sometimes we don't want to ask lots of questions because we don't want to be rude. But I think, Georgie's point was that we can ask those questions and we need to advocate on behalf of our kids.
Absolutely. And I think it's a nice reminder for Australian parents that the Parenthood is there, it exists, we can sign up, and they do a great job in advocating for reform and support for all of us. So, well, that was wonderful, but that does bring us to the end of today's episode. So just once again, a really big thank you to the amazing Georgie Dent, and we'll see you again next time for more Words Grow Minds. Thanks for listening to the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast. We love hearing from you, so please subscribe, review and comment on the podcast. And for plenty of ideas to support your child's development, go to wordsgrowminds.org.au and follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Your words will grow their mind.